Well, thank you very much for joining us in this session. It's called Armenia in a Shifting World. And now we would like to invite on stage the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan. His Excellency, please join us on stage. Great. Thank you very much. Excellent. Great to see you. Well, thank you very much for, first coming to Prague, and I hear this is the first time you participate in the GLOBSEC conference, the 20th anniversary. The session, as you know, is called Armenia in a Shifting World. The world is changing very fast. Before we get into specific details, I wonder if I could just start by a general question asking you, from your perspective, when you look at the world now, is it a more dangerous world? Is it a more confusing world? Is it a world where the rules are changing very fast?
You know, I think nobody would experience difficulties to answer to that question, unfortunately. The answer is obvious, that unfortunately, on a daily basis, world is getting more and more dangerous, and but from the other side, it is the job of politicians what to do to make a difference, and that's why now our government is concentrated on peace agenda in our region, because you know everyone is in search for security nowadays. And the reality is that only peace is able to secure security. So that's why we are working on this very important moment to try to make a difference and to trying to establish sustainable peace in our region, which is, I mean, first of all, our peace process with Azerbaijan. And you know that we've been able to conclude on the negotiations on the peace agreement with Azerbaijan. And now draft of agreement is agreed and waiting to be signed. And now we are in the process of consultations with Azerbaijan, how to get to that point and to sign and further ratify agreement, and we are on that process. Hopefully we will be able to do that as soon as possible.
And you said that the message of Armenia now, when it comes to the region specifically, will be one of peace and stability. Those are the goals that you will be pursuing and that you want to see. You already alluded to the outline of the peace treaty that you were managed to secure. That was in March. Of course, time goes by quickly. I wonder, however, from your perspective, are you confident that things are moving in the right direction? Because ultimately the goal is to see an implementation.
You know, the very fact that we agreed on a concrete draft, that means that that is concrete achievement. Of course, it needs to be implemented and further. And in general, yes, I'm sure that we will go to that point because we've been able to do many things, and there are concrete results, concrete achievements. By the way, parallelly with that, last year we've been able with Azerbaijan to start the delimitation process of our border, and now only approximately 12 kilometers of the border is delimited, but there is a very important nuance. You know, many people were very pessimistic connected with that, and there were many doubts whether Armenia and Azerbaijan will be able to implement that. But now we have a very concrete example, very concrete piece of peace, because you know usually I'm saying that the limited part of our border is a place with security guarantees. And that is reality. And I adopted a motto that saying that there will be no war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, there will be peace.
And of course, in order to make that a reality, are you looking at a specific time horizon? We're now approaching, we're halfway through 2025. Is this something that extends into 2026?
You know, there is a concrete situation. You know that Azerbaijan ties the process with some issues. One of them is the dissolution of Minsk Group, OSCE Minsk Group structures, which was created for as negotiating platform for Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and in general for the as negotiating platform for Armenia-Azerbaijani conflict. And Azerbaijan is raising the issue of dissolution of that mechanism. And in general, this is the acceptable agenda for us. But there is a very important nuance. We want to make sure that there is no chance for example, ending the page of conflict in territory of Azerbaijan and to export the conflict into territory of Armenia. Why there are such concerns? Because of, unfortunately, we see that in Azerbaijan, the process started when some Azerbaijani circles started to call approximately 60% of the sovereign territory of Armenia, Western Azerbaijan, which is very, very, very likely is a territorial claim against Armenia. But what is our perception of way out from this situation? We propose to sign peace agreement and to have dissolution of Minsk Group structures. And on timing, you know, I think we need to try to fulfill everything. Signing peace agreement and dissolution of Minsk Group mechanism until the end of this year. At least we will try to do that.
So the goal is still, before the year comes to an end in 2025, you would like to see that?
Yes, of course.
And you have now set a very clear outline of the peace draft that you were able to conclude. You also pointed some of the issues, perhaps, that have come up or could come up. You've also pointed to the time horizon that you would like to see. But of course, that is the perspective of Armenia. And you've said very clearly that we're now a country of peace and we want to see peace. But I wonder, however, in your conversations with the Azerbaijani leadership, and I know you met at the European political community and there was a time where you could discuss, I'm not sure how much you can reveal of private conversations, but what impression do you get from their side?
You know, the conversation was positive, and we agreed that we need to work together on the topic. And there are some nuances, and we are working, by the way, because actually we have no diplomatic relations so far with Azerbaijan, but we have diplomatic contacts. And we are working, and we are trying to sort out nuances. And you know, there is another issue that Azerbaijan is raising. It is connected with their perception that in the constitution of Armenia there are territorial claims against Azerbaijan. And you know, what is our perception of that issue raised by Azerbaijan? First of all, we are trying to perceive that as a sincere concern by Azerbaijan. And relying on that point, what is our reaction? Our reaction is that there is only one institution that could officially declare what Armenia's constitution contains and what does not contain Armenian constitution. And it is obviously our constitutional court. You know, last year, something very important happened. Armenia and Azerbaijan signed first ever international document, and it was regulation on the joint activities of delimitation commissions of both sides. And there is a very important nuance. There is a provision that Alma-Ata Declaration of 1991 is a basic principle for delimitation process of our borders with Azerbaijan. What is Alma-Ata Declaration? It is declaration signed by 11 former Soviet Republic countries at the time of collapse of Soviet Union. And there is two main meaning of Alma-Ata Declaration. First, Soviet Union stops to exist, and second, Soviet republics, including Armenia and Azerbaijan, becoming independent countries, recognizing each other sovereignty, territorial integrity, inviolability of existing at that time border. And there is another nuance, because after that, you know that we had long-lasting conflict. But after that, in the 6th October of 2022, in Prague,
yes,
in the margins of the European Political Community Summit, Armenia and Azerbaijan, with participation and with presence of France and the European Union, decided establish and solve the issues between countries based on Alma-Ata Declaration. So that means, what that means? That means that Soviet time Alma-Ata Declaration means that Soviet time Armenia is independent Armenia with the same territory, and Soviet time Azerbaijan is independent Azerbaijan with the same territory. So after that, let's return to the regulation that has been signed by Armenia and Azerbaijan. We sent it, according to our legislation, to our constitutional court to decide the compliance of that document with our constitution. So our constitutional court decided that this is fully compliant with our constitution. That means that according to legally binding decision of our constitutional court, there is no any territorial claim in our constitution against Armenia or against any other neighbor. But there is another very important nuance too. I said already that we agreed the draft of peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And there we have already the same Alma-Ata Declaration on the agreed text as basic principle for peace and establishing interstate relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is second provision that Armenia and Azerbaijan recognize in each other territorial integrity, sovereignty, inviolability of borders, relying on the fact that Soviet time administrative borders became state borders. And there is another very important provision that parties, I mean Armenia and Azerbaijan, have no any territorial claim against each other and obliged not to raise such claims in the future. And there is another very important provision that none of the parties may invoke to their internal legislation as justification of failing implementation of this agreement. So I'm sorry, what is my point? So when we will sign this agreement with Azerbaijan, government must send it to the Constitutional Court of Armenia. So we have two versions. Constitutional Court could decide, for example, that this isn't compliant with our constitution. So even though our experts say that there is it isn't likely, because our constitutional court already decided on Almata Declaration. But court is court. If court would decide that it isn't compliant with our constitution, in that case, we will have to make a choice. And I said already publicly that if our constitutional court would decide that it isn't compliant with our constitution, I will personally initiate constitutional reforms. But such reforms that would allow us to go ahead. But if our constitutional court would decide that it is fully compliant with our constitution, we can send it to Parliament and ratify. And the last point is, in case of ratification of that agreement in our Parliament, we have provision in our constitution that ratified international documents have higher legal force than local legislation. So I mean, in case when Azerbaijani concerns are sincere, for addressing those concerns, the direct and guaranteed way for that is to sign peace agreement. And I'm sorry, last point, Armenia also has some concerns connected with Azerbaijani constitution, etc., etc. But we don't raise that issue. Why? Because we see that in already agreed draft of peace agreement, that issue also, in our case as well, it is solved, it is decided. So we need to go and sign that agreement to solve all those issues.
And Prime Minister, of course, this was a very detailed explanation that you gave, but it points to...
I hope it was clear.
It was, it's
because it is maybe too complicated.
But it also points to, again, some of the complexities, and you talked about some of the nuances that you may have, although you say we're not raising any of the nuances constitutionally that the Azerbaijani side may bring up, but they may have still some nuances about yours, and you've also explained how that process would go ahead. But the reason why I insist on the timeline, however, is a number of analysts suggest that the worst case scenario could be, and this could materialize, and this is why it's important to keep the momentum going, is that if this becomes delayed and the signature doesn't happen, then that could lead, unfortunately, it's happened before in the past in other regions too, that tensions respark again, a ceasefire may be broken, and ultimately you are not going to achieve what you say you want to achieve, which is lasting peace. So do you fear this could materialize if things are not moving along?
You know, I already said that there won't be war and escalation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There will be peace. Look, we are concentrated. We will try to sign it in June. If we won't be successful, we will try to do it in July. You know, repeatedly, we will work on that. We will work on that, and eventually we will sign peace agreement, and we will establish peace. Because, you know, peace agreement, which I mentioned, it is a kind of mutual achievement of diplomats of Armenia and Azerbaijan, and I think. And by the way, we have already signed first international document. And by the way, recently, you know what happened? Azerbaijan supported Armenia's candidacy to host 88 next EPC summit, and it will happen.
You like that format, the EPC? It's obviously, some say it's very useful.
And,
it's not, it connects you to the EU in very useful ways.
And it is very important. Armenia supported Azerbaijani candidacy to host EPC in 2028. So, I mean, you know, everywhere and always there are many challenges. Obviously, there are many challenges. But my point is that we have already got to a point that we can be sure that they won't be war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There will be peace.
And you make that very clear. There's another very interesting point that I wanted to show, and maybe we can show it in the images very quickly, which is the idea of the middle corridor. And this is a very big piece of infrastructure that could potentially connect Southeast Asia all the way to Europe. I wonder, perhaps if we could show it on the screens, this is something that you find very interesting, but of course it's not a secret that the regional communications are very difficult, at times non-existent. So I think very briefly, Prime Minister, if you could explain why you find this interesting and why you think in this context of the GLOBSEC, it's also important for a European audience to be aware of it.
You know, when we are talking on lasting and sustainable peace, it is very important to create a kind of environment of, let's say, interdependencies, you know, and the best tool for that is infrastructures and economy, transit ways, etc., etc. So Armenian government created this project named Crossroads of Peace, and you know that until now 2 our borders out of 4 are totally closed. I mean our borders with Turkey and with Azerbaijan. And this proposal about the opening, opening all kind of connectivity between Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and including from Azerbaijan to Azerbaijan through territory of Armenia, and from Armenia to Armenia through territory of Azerbaijan. And that would become another very important factor for regional peace and stability. And we are discussing, and we are going more thoroughly to discuss this project with our neighbors.
So you say we're reaching the end of the session, but I have to ask you about this because you already brought it up. You say that this is something that you think it's not just going to be economically beneficial, but will be a factor of stabilizing relationships through former dependencies. You mentioned Turkey. With Turkey, are you also actively trying to pursue an agenda of normalization? And what feedback do you have from the Turkish government? Because it's a big regional player.
During recent years, we've been able to establish a quite active dialogue between Armenia and Turkey. We had several meetings with President Erdogan, and those meetings were constructive. And on the ground, we have no many achievements tangibly. But for example, when 3 years ago Armenia would like to know what is the position of Turkey on some points, we would need to ask about that the third country and to ask Turkey and bring the response back. But now we have direct and let's say everyday contact with our neighbors, and I hope that this process, and I'm sure that eventually this process will lead to the establishment of diplomatic relations and opening of borders and creating economic ties, etc., etc. My impression and my opinion is that it is a matter of time. Of course, it is connected with wider economic regional agenda, but as I said, we are adhered to the agenda of establishing sustainable peace in our region, and we are determined to do our part of job, of course. But from the other side, to be honest, we see the willingness from Turkey, and we see that Azerbaijan is ready for peace. And there are nuances, some nuances, and we need to deliver and address those nuances, and I'm sure we will be able to do that.
Well, Prime Minister, thank you so much. In a difficult world, you made your message clear. You want to see a normalization of ties, normal diplomatic relationships, and a message of peace. So we thank you for your time, and we thank you for coming to GLOBSEC, and hopefully we'll see you again next year for the next edition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Prime Minister of
Thank
Armenia,
you.
thank you so much.